Hello and welcome to the CEO Dialogue. I'm Shereen Bhan and today we are here at the Air India Experience Centre in Gurugram and we're in conversation with the Managing Director and CEO to talk about the flight path in light of the fact that we now have that mega merger of Air India and Vistara underway and in fact completed. Campbell, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. It's great to have you back. Almost a year since we last spoke and a lot has changed then. Bhan was in the takeoff phase and today it's in the climb phase and the Air India Vistara merger is now done. I want to start with that. I mean, it's been a massive exercise, not just the Air India and Vistara merger, but also, of course, Air India Express. And what have been the big complexities, the big challenges as you've tried to get these mergers done in the last 2 years?
Well, I think an airline merger is probably amongst the most complex of any corporate merger. You've got the regulatory side of things, in addition to the legal side of things. There's a lot of staff, and you're a 24/7 operation, so you've got aircraft in the air even at the point of merger. So we've been working towards this for 2 years, aligning the operation procedures across the 4 airlines, aligning the regulatory approvals that the 4 airlines hold, aligning the terms and conditions of all of the employees, and that was 5 groups of employees because there was the old Indian Airlines group that had not been regularized even now. Systems needed to be brought into harmonization, the customer proposition to the best we could. You know, it's been a long, multifaceted process, and I'm pleased with the way it's gone. It's never perfect. It takes a while to fully stabilize, but we're now a 300 aircraft, 30,000 group organization, carrying 60 million people a year on more than 300 routes. And I think the team and all the supporting agencies like the DGCA and the ministry can take some pride that what takes airlines in other countries 5 to 8 years was done in India in a little over 2.
Okay, so that then begs the question that, you know, have you taken on more than you can chew? Because if it traditionally takes or typically takes 5 to 8 years or 10 years perhaps in other aviation markets to pull a merger like this through, you've been able to do it in a little over 2 years. So from a customer's point of view, how much longer will the customer have to wait for operations to stabilize now between Air India and Vistara and to truly be able to get that kind of experience?
Well, operations have effectively stabilized. We actually did the merger on the 12th of November. Deliberately to avoid both Diwali and the fog season. Unfortunately, on the 13th of November, we got very unseasonable smoke and fog in Delhi, which caused disruption for all airlines, which came at a very fragile time for us, and so it did take a couple of days to fully recover. But I think from an operations perspective, we are now operating normally. From a customer perspective, it really starts allowing us to strengthen the proposition. So effective 1st of December, we will be deploying all of the Vistara aircraft on the metro routes. More than 1,000 flights a week, all the flights between Delhi and Mumbai and Delhi and Hyderabad and Bangalore and Delhi and so on are going to be offered by the Vistara aircraft. So the customer proposition, I think, is now more consistent, more quality, and I think people can come to the Air India group with more confidence than they were able to before.
And this is on account of the feedback that you got, because there was this sort of complaint of inconsistent performance across people used to Vistara now moving to Air India.
Yeah, so we've been very deliberate about when we deploy Vistara aircraft, we denote them with a specific flight number. Yeah. It starts with AI2. It has Vistara crew, it's obviously Vistara aircraft. The catering is the same across both airlines. We adopted Vistara catering across both airlines. But now, by deploying the ex-Vistara aircraft on the main metro routes, it just makes the product much more consistent. And I think, let's not forget that business people like consistency and frequency. On Delhi-Mumbai, we offer 27 flights a day. And so I think now people can really have some confidence that the Air India business proposition is one that is credible and consistent.
You know, you talked about the in-flight meal service and where that now has been consolidated. If you take me through what you've been able to successfully consolidate at the vendor level, on the back end, how much of that is work in progress still, how much of that is completed?
Well, all of the systems are now harmonized. The consumer interfaces, call centers, websites, apps are harmonized. The loyalty program is now one new Maharaja Club. And so all of the Vistara members now have access to a much, much larger network than they previously had. So as far as the customer interface experience is, other than the aircraft, it is the same. Now, the aircraft are going to be made progressively the same. A third of Air India's legacy narrow-body fleet has been upgraded, and by the middle of 2025 it will be fully upgraded so that everything is of a similar standard. We still have work to do with the wide-body aircraft. About a third of those aircraft have been upgraded. It will take another couple of years to complete that process because of the supply chain and regulatory requirements of seats and the installation of them. But I think we're making good progress.
So what is the delay that we're talking about, especially on the wide body, because that impacts your international operations? I mean, is it a year or longer in terms of a delay that we're going to see as far as the retrofits are concerned?
So we committed more than 400 million to the retrofit program back in 2022. We also selected the seats back in 2022. There is a regulatory design, certification, and then subsequently manufacturing process that we need to go through. And that is where the supply chain constraint has hit us. Two different manufacturers came back to us and said, look, we just cannot deliver to the time frame that we had committed. There's going to be a delay. In one case, it was 6 months. In the other case, it was a little longer. So the program that actually should have physically started on the aircraft already will now not start until next year. The 787 aircraft, the first of the retrofit ship sets, will come in April. It'll take a few months to install and be certified. First aircraft hopefully in service by October next year. The 777s will have a refresh next year, but then go for a full retrofit starting in 2026.
So that 400 million that you spoke of, that was committed as far as the retrofit program was concerned. Do you believe you may need to now allocate more capital towards the retrofit exercise? Well,
the sad fact is yes. In one case, we've had to change seat vendors. This refresh I talk about, which is an interim step on the 777s, is something that we hadn't provisioned for originally and is only necessary because of the delay to the seat deliveries. But look, we've made this decision to invest more because we realise that this is, we can change everything else about the airline, and we nearly have changed everything else about the airline. But until we change the last 40 of our legacy wide-body aircraft to the standard that we expect of ourselves, let alone what customers expect of us, I think people will not consider the job complete, and we won't consider the job complete.
So how much more are you going to have to spend over and above the 400 million which have already been committed?
Well, I won't say, but it's in the tens of millions.
In the tens of millions. In terms of capital allocation to ensure that you deliver on the promise and the service that you have outlined as far as creating a global airline with an Indian heart is concerned, what are we talking about now outside of the retrofit? In terms of annual sort of capital outlay, what kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, we don't reveal, but I think we've previously said, the 470 aircraft that we've committed to have a list value of 70 billion US. The 400 million we've talked about, with a little bit of addition now for the retrofit, the 200 million odd that we've spent on completely revamping the IT landscape. The investment that we're making in turning around Air India is significant. It will take some time to turn around the airline from a financial perspective, but I think if you look at our reports, we are making very, very good progress. And so I think we always said that this would be at least a 5-year turnaround. There was a reason why we said that it will be a 5-year turnaround. There was a reason why the economists said that it was the Everest of corporate turnarounds. I think what we've achieved in a little over 2 years is significant. It's certainly not finished. We are as impatient as anyone to bring it to closure, but I think progress is occurring.
Yes, progress is being made, and as you point out, there is a long distance to go, and not everything is in your control at this point in time. But do you believe that that 5-year transformation plan under Vihan that you put together, and we're now in the climb phase, as you call it, are you going to have to stretch this out further, given the fact that there are delays both in terms of possibly aircraft arrival as well as on the retrofit side?
At this juncture, no. Things that are in our control, I think we've done almost exactly on time. At this juncture, we don't think we would need to stretch it out for things that are not under our control, but look, things that are not under your control are not under your control. So,
let me ask you about the issues that customers seem to be facing, and we've seen headlines over the past few weeks in terms of delays on the 80-hour passengers being stranded at Phuket and so on and so forth. I mean, what do you attribute? I mean, an 80-hour delay is a long time. Is this an issue of aircraft? Is it an issue of the lack of crew? I mean, from a customer's point of view, people would want to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Look, aviation is aviation. There are all sorts of external events and all sorts of internal things that contribute to these issues. As I say, we fly 8,300 flights a week. and we use machines and fly into weather and different geographies. And so I think aviation will always have these oddball events. It's more important how we handle them when it happens. So in this particular case in Phuket, there was an aircraft that had a technical issue. We believed it had been fixed by the local engineers. It turned out that it hadn't been fixed. And then as we tried to disperse the passengers on other flights back to India, there was a shortage of capacity because it was a holiday season. And so the headline is 80 hours. A very small number of people were impacted for a long time. The vast majority were able to be brought back very quickly. But unfortunately, that is the nature of aviation. We want to make it less and less frequent, but it's not going to be eliminated forever, I don't think, by any airline.
You know, speaking of oddball events, I want to talk to you about what we saw happen over the last 3 months with these bomb hoax threats, and it disrupted aviation across the country, and it disrupted aviation across airlines, including Air India. Indigo got the maximum number of hoax threats, and second was Air India. You know, dealing with that, do you have any ideas now on what really transpired, what was going on, what was behind it, who was behind it, and dealing with that on a daily basis?
Well, we're a private enterprise, so we can only go so far into determining who and why people are doing such things. There's obviously very clear guidance, both internal and regulatory, of what we do when we do receive such a threat. It is disruptive to the operation. It's clearly disruptive to customers. I think during the course of this spate of events, which was unprecedented, I think, globally in terms of number and duration, I think we all learned a little bit about how we can handle such things more consistently, and by that I mean also the regulatory environment. Look, it's just malicious and it's frustrating, but thankfully now we seem to be through it.
You know, the government has responded in Parliament today saying that they have, of course, been in conversation, the regulator, with airlines and the government and so on and so forth. Is there a new SOP that's been put in place, you know, to deal with this kind of a situation? Hopefully it doesn't come to pass again, but if it were to, is there a new SOP that's been put in place on how to handle it?
Well, the airline SOP remains the same. We take every threat seriously. We've got an assessment committee. We have reporting obligations to the regulator, and there's certain actions that we're required to take if there's a threat that's deemed sufficiently serious. At the government and regulatory level, I believe there is the constitution of a new group with some extra members so that there can be a faster, more informed, more consistent assessment of such threats. But that would be more for the government to give.
You know, I would imagine that this is a stress test of the worst kind, not just for the airline, but for all agencies involved. And I want to understand, and I'm curious to understand, what it must have been like for you and your team in that time period, when on a daily basis you're just getting these sort of tweets and calls and threats without having to know how you cope with this. I mean, what was that period like?
Again, I hate to say it, but that is aviation. It's a 24/7 business. I mean, in this particular case, it was hoax threats, but you've got weather events, snowstorms in New York, you've got labour strikes in Paris. We're used to getting woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning by a phone call saying, there's something happening.
So that's just a regular day for you?
It's not I wouldn't say it's a regular day, but it's not an infrequent occurrence.
But what has been the cost of that? Because, you know, I would imagine the cost implications have been significant. I mean, you know, you've got flights being disrupted, you've got to reimburse passengers, you've got to reschedule them. What, a ballpark number of what it could have cost you and the industry?
Yeah, quite honestly, I don't have that ballpark number, but it's not cheap. We had one particular aircraft, for example, have to land in remote Canada. And that obviously incurs a significant cost. But the real frustration is more about what is the impact to the customers, what is the impact to our employees, both those that are flying as well as those that are dealing with the disruption consequence. You know, I'm glad that there seems to be stability and new structures in place to ensure that we hopefully don't see a repeat.
You know, you talked about the Middle East and the crisis in the Middle East, and all of this has also impacted airlines across the world. It's had an impact as far as your flying hours are concerned, which also automatically impacts your costs. As you look at geopolitics and the way that it's reshaping the way that airlines do their business, I mean, what has been the impact, and how do you address this? I mean, in terms of routes, in terms of how you're looking at networks, how do you respond to this?
Well, in many cases, there's no choice. So, for example, if there is, for example, as I say, missiles being lobbed around certain parts of the world, we have to reroute aircraft. There's no choice. There are some cities that we've suspended operations to because we don't believe that it's either safe for our crew or we don't believe that the constant change of is it or is it not safe is an operational, we're not able to cope with that up and down operational change. But again, I'm sorry to keep using the phrase, but it is aviation. We deal with this all the time.
Well, I want to go back to the integration itself, as well as talk about the future plans on the integration, the people integration, and that perhaps is also one of the most complex aspects of ensuring that the integration is a success. Where do things stand? Because there were complications linked to compensation and linked to HR policies on both sides, especially Vistara and Air India, including even things like retirement age. I mean, where do things stand on being able to iron out those issues?
I think almost entirely there. There's a couple of things that we've parked for the time being, retirement age being one. But look, we bought 4 airlines, really 5 if you consider Indian Airlines unfinished business. We bought those together, and in all such combinations, it's not just you pick all the lowest or all the highest denominator. And so there are some pluses and some minuses, but on balance, we feel that everyone benefits from this consolidation, not least because of the huge new opportunities now open to people with the massive expansion and growth that we are undertaking. So, if you look at things in isolation, perhaps some people have some positives or negatives to comment about individual things, but on balance, I think that this is hugely beneficial for all involved.
On the expansion and growth plans that you alluded to at this point in time, I think one of the questions being asked is that as your supply side issues continue to work themselves out, as you wait for the seats to be refurbished, retrofitted, all of that, does it make sense then to look at perhaps pausing and taking stock of operations, not expanding beyond a certain point, so that you can give the customers what they truly deserve in terms of experience, so that you don't have customers getting to the airport and being told you don't get a reclinable chair and so on and so forth? Is there thinking at this point in time to not spread yourselves too wide, to focus on the routes that you currently operate so that customers can get the experience that they are looking for?
Well, absolutely, both by design and also by circumstance. We won't be receiving a huge number of aircraft over the next 12 months by virtue of the fact that those that we leased in early or were able to acquire that had already been made but never delivered to others, most of those have now arrived. The aircraft that come off the production line come towards the end of the next calendar or early next financial year. So there is this 11-month window that exactly does allow us to do that. We've added 100 aircraft at the group level over the last 18 months, 24 months. And so I think it is an appropriate time to consolidate, take stock, get the refit programs underway. As I say, the narrow body refit will be complete by the middle of 25. The wide body refit will be underway in 2025. And we're rolling out Wi-Fi, we're rolling out entertainment to people's own devices, we're upgrading serviceware and meals, the crew uniform rebranding is coming, the lounges are opening. So the A350 is now flying to Heathrow in New York. So there's a lot that we've introduced, and yes, now is the time to stabilize, make things consistent, and ensure that the customer proposition is what people expect.
So are you looking at reviewing the number of connections that you offer today? Are you looking at any route rationalization at all at this point in time?
So there is, I wouldn't say route rationalization, there is deployment rationalization. So as I've mentioned, on the metro routes in India, it's going to be the Vistara aircraft that are operating. Likewise, Frankfurt, both of the double daily flights that we put into Frankfurt are going to be offered with the Vistara 787. Every flight from Delhi to Heathrow is our A350. Every flight from Mumbai to Heathrow is our modern generation 777. Both New York flights from Delhi are going to be the A350. So at Singapore, Dubai, we're going to be progressively deploying the best aircraft on what we would consider the flagship routes. And as we upgrade those aircraft, then obviously the rest of the network will benefit over time. So it's certainly part of the plan.
Well, speaking of plans, and I want to come back to the people issue, and I understand that the average age within the organization has dropped from 54 to about 28 today, and a large part of that has to do with, also I would imagine the VRS, etc., that has worked itself out of the system. As you look at the future, what's the hiring plan, both in terms of cabin crew, in terms of pilots, in terms of catering to the kind of expansion that you envisage?
Well, it's 54 to 35 for the non-flying crew, and the average age of cabin crew is now 28. So a significant change, and it was both the injection of more than 9,000 new people as well as the VRS of about 3,000. Because we are now in this period of relative stability over the next few months, there isn't a huge induction plan for new aircraft, new employees. But we have started flight school. We've broken ground on a maintenance base in Bangalore, for which we need engineers, and we're opening a base maintenance training school. There is the training academy that we now have in Gurgaon that trains, upgrades 2,000 people a day, and in that we're going to be adding up to 20 flight simulators. So the upgradation of people and the induction of people for future needs will continue. It's just at a relatively slower pace than it will be until we resume the very dramatic expansion as the aircraft start coming off the production line.
How concerned are you about that? I mean, the good news is that the strike at Boeing has been called off, but what is the visibility that you now have in terms of deliveries?
Well, it is still a bit of a moving target for them as well as for us. They've given us guidance on the delivery of the aircraft that were going to be delivered over the next few months that will be pushed a little bit further into 2025. It's probably a little bit too early to say what the implications are for the narrow-body aircraft beyond 2025. But the 787 aircraft, which is produced in a different factory in the US, is much less affected. And so we still expect to receive that reasonably on time.
So how many aircraft do you get in 2025, or do you have visibility on getting in 2025?
I wouldn't say. I don't have full line of sight yet.
At the moment. We're talking about growth at this point in time. Let me ask you about the competitive landscape in India. It's largely now between Air India, the group, and of course Indigo. And Indigo has also now just introduced its business class service offering on the Delhi-Mumbai routes. How do you look at the competitive landscape? It seems like it's a monopoly of two.
Which would be called a duopoly, but no, it's not. I mean, there are third and fourth players in the market. I think India is going through a consolidation phase, which has gone through in North America, in Europe, and other parts of the world previously. From an unprofitable ecosystem, a bit chaotic, people coming and going, to one that is now stabilized, professionalized, able to invest, and ultimately to create a profitable ecosystem. Once it's profitable, many more people will want to jump in, and that's perfectly fine. But for the moment, I think this consolidation is a necessary phase. Look, and India, it's the third largest domestic travel market in the world. It's growing at a compound growth rate of 7%. There's clearly room for certainly more than one, certainly more than two airlines. And it's natural that we will evolve to the different market segments that India itself will evolve to. Historically, it's been people are starting to travel for the first time, or infrequent travellers for whom price is a very important priority. As people travel more often and as people move up the socioeconomic scale, the pursuit of something other than price becomes priority for some. So I think this is just a natural phase of the evolution of the Indian market, and it's an incredibly exciting place to be.
Yeah, we're going through a second phase of consolidation. The last one we saw was in the early 2000s or the mid-2000s. But, what does that mean in terms of pricing power for airlines like yourself? And also on the back of the merger and the integration, what are the cost efficiencies that we're talking about? I mean, what does that realistically mean in terms of margin improvement for Air India?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole regulatory and legal structure that you need to maintain if you're an independent organisation or an independent airline. There's duplication of many positions. There aren't the economies of scale that you can enjoy when you're a 300 aircraft airline. So clearly there are efficiencies, and we've realised some, and there are more that we wish to realise. And that was part of the motivation for putting the businesses together. But I wouldn't want to give you particular figures. With respect to pricing power, I'd refer you to an article that was literally just released by IATA, which traces how airfares have tracked relative to the CPI and relative to oil prices, not just in India, but in many countries. And what you will find that if you index back to 2015 or 2019, airfares have gone down. And not only gone down, but gone down dramatically relative to inflation and relative to oil price. So I think just the competitive dynamic of aviation and the market will mean that airfares will remain affordable, and of course we want to fill our planes. So there's always going to be a benefit to the customer in that respect.
You talked about the path to profitability, not just for Air India, but also for the aviation industry here in India. But let's talk about Air India in specific. You have been able to bring down losses quite significantly in the last 2 years. What does the outlook look like in terms of profitability for you? Well,
we're a private company, and I won't say, but clearly there are expectations from shareholders as well as customers. And we feel that there's a good path forward. We are as impatient to realise those ambitions as much as the customer ambitions. So still work in progress.
But is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 2-year plan? Is it a 3-year plan? What are we talking about?
No, I think best not to reveal.
Best not to reveal because you don't have...
No, because 40% of our cost is fuel.
Yeah.
And
which has been relatively stable.
Yes, but it could not be. Next year it might be a very different story. So,
well, given where fuel is today, if I were to ask you, given where fuel is today, what could the path to profitability look like?
There is a path to profitability, and that's as far as I'll go.
Okay, that's as far as you go. Capital infusion, I mean, Singapore Airlines with now 25% will infuse a little over 3,100 crores into the business. What does the capital infusion outlay look like between both Singapore Airlines as well as you?
Well, we have a lot of aircraft investment, obviously. The aircraft deliveries are spread over a period of time. I think it's no secret that we've financed a number of those aircraft, the 350s through Gift City. We're doing a number of sale and leasebacks of the narrow bodies. So I think from a capital perspective, those assets are able to generate capital too. So I think from a shareholder perspective, it's more a question for them, but we don't envisage.
What has been the most complex aspect of this integration, getting this integration done? What has been the most satisfying aspect of it as well?
Goodness, what is the most complex thing? I think probably, look, there are airlines that have gone from public ownership to private ownership.
Yeah.
There's airlines that have gone from a certain size, adding 100 aircraft in 2 years. There's airlines that have completely changed their IT structure. There's airlines that have rebranded. There's airlines that have refreshed their management team. There's airlines that have built training academies and base maintenance. I could go on and on and on. There's airlines that have merged. There's no one that's merged two concurrent airlines. But no one, I don't think, has done all of this at the same time. And so that probably has been, the most challenging because there has been just so much happening at the same time. And it's a credit to everyone involved that they have adjusted to so much change concurrently. But secondly, it's also probably the most rewarding thing that, yes, there's impatience for this transformation to be finished and people to see the Air India they want to see. Yes, I wish it could be happening even faster than it is. But I think let's acknowledge that this, as the economist says, Everest of corporate turnarounds, this is happening in India. And it's happening with a set of Indian companies, with the assistance of Indian regulators. And so I think, as much as we want it to be faster and progress further, I think a lot has been achieved. And so hats off to India.
Well, since you keep bringing up the Everest of corporate turnarounds, where are you? Have you crossed the base camp yet, or are you still there?
Well, it's probably apt that we call this phase climb because we're still climbing.
You're still climbing. So outlook for 2025, we're almost at the end of this calendar year. Demand, I mean, we've crossed a milestone for the aviation sector here in India with 5 lakh passengers. What does the demand scenario look like? What are the milestones that you're hoping to clock in 2025?
Well, I think for us, continue to land the rest of the transformation program, make sure the merger continues to be stable, work on the consistency of the customer proposition, work on the consistency of the employee proposition, expedite the refit program as best we can, and then, of course, work towards improved profitability. So there's never a shortage of challenges. There will always be a few surprises along the way, I'm sure, too. But 2025 is really when the parts now start coming together and we extract the consistency, the efficiency, and the customer proposition.
How often do you look at social media, if at all?
I occasionally.
Okay.
Occasionally.
And what has that experience been like for you? Looking at what customers have to say, and does that concern you? Does it worry you? How do you respond to that?
Look, whether you're an actor or a comedian or an airline executive or anyone else, the common advice is don't really read the comments, because there's always going to be someone that comments in a certain way. Look, we know that there are some customers that want us to be better. We know we fail some. But at the same time, and I need to point out, our A350 flying to London Heathrow and now New York, it has an NPS score voted by customers of 70. That is world class. Our domestic product is an NPS of 40 plus, which is the same as Vistara was, within a point or two. So I think we can read the comments, we can read stories about the extreme events, but I think on average, I think customers are seeing a material improvement in Air India. By no means is it a finished process, but there's been huge improvement from a year ago to now. There will continue to be improvement as we move forward. This is not, as I say, a one day, it's a test match, and we're only in day 3.
Well, speaking of cricket, what do you make of what's been going on as far as the India-Australia test match is concerned?
Well, I was hoping you were going to ask about the India-New Zealand series. But,
I wasn't about to go down that road. What about India-Australia?
Well, I think it's a return to normal programming for India, back to their winning ways.
Well, speaking of winning ways, 2025, the priorities that you've set out for yourself and the team?
Well, I think I covered them before: consistency, quality, efficiency, improved profitability. Really starting to put together the future Air India now that so many of the transformation ingredients have come to some form of landing.
Campbell, always a pleasure. Many, many thanks for joining us here on the CEO Dialogue. Appreciate your time, and we wish you the very best of luck as you look at taking Air India beyond the climb phase, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Shereen.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the CEO Dialogue. From all of us here on the team, for now, goodbye, and many thanks for watching.